What's good? It's your boy Twiz. So I was reading my comments today and I came across something that I had to respond to. I started to respond in comment form and I said, you know what? This might make a better video because that way I can give more detailed feedback and really get my point across in this one. I would normally call a video like this a hater video, but I don't really see this guy as a hater. More like somebody who just has a misconception of the whole point of cloud streaming and Stadia in general. So let's just go ahead and jump into it.
Can wait to play Bethesda new games on my Xbox Series 10, the most powerful console, while using my Elite Series 2 controller, which is the world's most advanced controller. That's all jokes, but I would even be happy if Sony had bought Bethesda because it would at least be a company that been in gaming for years and isn't a company who only wants you to stream games because they say hardware is obsolete.
Just to give some context, this was in reply to the video I made where I was talking about Microsoft buying ZeniMax and therefore Bethesda and all that. But anyway, you're claiming that the cloud service providers said that hardware will be obsolete. I'm having a hard time searching and finding where they specifically said this, but I do understand the spirit of where you're coming from and why you think that is the message. So let's go ahead and tackle that. Honestly, man, it depends on the user. It depends on the individual. We can use Netflix for example. Obviously, when you stream a movie from Netflix, it's probably not gonna be as good a quality as watching a local DVD or a local Blu-ray. But it's gonna be close enough to where a lot of people won't even notice or won't care, especially if they enjoy the benefits they get from it, such as the convenience and a rotating library. They might enjoy that more than the slight, barely noticeable increase in quality. So if you value the convenience more than the slight increase in quality, then for you, the DVD and Blu-ray player might be obsolete. If you want the most quality you can, regardless of convenience, then for you, it's not obsolete. The same logic is easily applied to game streaming. Depending on the individual, how good their internet connection is, how close they are to a data center, and their selection of games, if they, as long as they got the games they care about, game streaming might make local hardware for them obsolete. We're not only arguing about which one will run at highest quality with no compression and the least amount of latency. Those are benefits of current local hardware, but you're missing out convenience. You're missing out cost of the hardware. There's other reasons to like playing in the cloud besides just playing at the highest possible graphical fidelity, which I admit is important, but is it more important than convenience? Is it more important than a rotating library of games? Is it more important than ease of access? Is it more important than portability? You see, that answer, or the answer to those questions, is different for everybody. And the whole purpose of cloud streaming, the reason it's becoming a thing now, because the technology around cloud game streaming is good enough to where there is a sizable amount of people that think game streaming is good enough to where it can make traditional gaming obsolete, or at least complement it.
What's up?
Fuck, I'm a dumbass!
Hardware will always be better than streaming a game.
Again, it depends on what you mean by better, and it's going to be different between different people. I feel like I already did a good job explaining this, but I'm going to try one more time just to really seal the deal. But to do so, I need to make some assumptions. By local hardware being better than streaming, I assume you mean a direct, uncompressed video feed going straight to your TV minus any internet latency. Running the game that's installed locally on your hardware, or at least on a disk drive that you have in your possession. I assume that's what you mean when you say local hardware is going to be better than game streaming. So let's touch on that. You don't have to download or install. What about portability? What about the ability to play on any room in your house? What about the ability to play anywhere you go? You can go to work, or you can go to a friend's house, you can go to your neighbor's house. You can go sit outside on your porch. That is something that's not really easy to do with local hardware. And yes, you can make the example of something like the Nintendo Switch, but what happens when your Switch just stops working? Maybe it gets damaged. Maybe you lose it. Maybe you lose your games. What about if you have an appointment at the dentist and you're waiting a lot longer than you planned on doing, and you didn't think ahead of time to bring your Switch with you because you did not think you're going to be waiting that long? Wouldn't it be nice just to pull out your phone that you're always going to have with you and play your games there? These are the advantages of the cloud, and these are just things I'm making up off the top of my head that are actually real situations. Notice I didn't even touch on the cost. I mean, eventually your Nintendo Switch, your Xbox, your PlayStation is going to be outdated. If you want to continue to play the new Xbox, PlayStation, or Nintendo games, you're going to have to go out and buy a new dedicated piece of hardware just to do that. In the cloud, that's not necessary. And we're talking about the cloud as it is today, with the internet we have today. The internet has greatly improved over the last 10 years, and 10 years from now it will greatly improve again. More data centers will be available and we'll have faster connections. The cloud will be even better then than it is now. At that point, do you think it might, maybe, for some people, make local hardware obsolete? Something to think about, man.
Game streaming can replace hardware, but it can and should accompany it so you can try games for 15 to 30 minutes to see if you like it and to let you take your game library with you.
I'm actually not gonna let this one slide. So it's at this point that I'm starting to realize that maybe your opinions are not really your opinions, because what you said right there sounds eerily similar to the same thing Phil Spencer said when he was trying to sell xCloud. I don't remember his exact wording, but it was very similar to what you just said. Something about xCloud can be used as a snackable, short experience for you to try a game out before you dedicate to downloading it completely. Which, to be fair, you can use it for that. But I feel like he more said that because compared to his competitor at the time, Google Stadia, the cloud experience for xCloud is not good as the cloud experience for Stadia. So he tried to make it seem like an add-on to the local hardware.
I don't really mind because I killed you.
That's fucking stressful as shit, man. I don't like that. Fuck!
That was close. But please pay attention. As xCloud improves and they improve their data centers as well as their streaming capabilities, they're going to start pushing xCloud more and more as a standalone platform. Of course, they're still going to encourage you to buy an Xbox if you will buy one. But they're no longer going to say it's a snackable experience you do on the side, and they're going to start pushing it and say, hey, you can just game this way alone if you want to. Just in its current state, at least compared to its competition, not very many people would want to. I also want to add, if you feel like you just want to game on the side but mainly game on hardware, then for you, currently cloud streaming did not make your hardware obsolete. But what if you take somebody like me with a fiber optic connection and I live decently close to the data centers? I'm perfectly happy playing my games only in the cloud. If my games run in the cloud at an ultra low latency to the point where I don't even feel it, the graphics look just like I'm playing on my PC, why would I want to waste my time and wait for a download or take my hard drive space in my PC? You see, for somebody like me, and over time, many more people, the advantages of the cloud will far outweigh the minor advantages I'll get from playing locally. Now, you'll always have the purists, the people who have to play it 100% the best. They notice every single little pixel. Yeah, in that case, those people won't change. Those are the same people that rather watch Blu-rays today as opposed to watch Netflix. But even though there are some people like that, the majority of people with access to Netflix will rather just stream it as opposed to order DVDs in the mail. Because by the way, Netflix still lets you order DVDs and Blu-ray, but the amount of people ordering them pale in comparison to the people who actually stream their videos.
Stadia and Luna can't replace hardware and won't be at a point it can compete with hardware for years, so Google and Amazon need to prove if they are fully in or not because they can't be halfway in.
Again, you don't really clarify what you mean, so I have to make assumptions, but I assume you're talking about as far as graphical fidelity and the horsepower running the games. Well, currently, Stadia actually outperforms the base PlayStation 4 and is on average comparable to the Xbox One X. And if you assume the Xbox One X is about $500, if you look at Stadia for being $500 cheaper, therefore free, and it can outperform or at least keep pace with the Xbox One X in many titles, that sounds like a hell of a deal. What do you mean it can't replace it? What if I want to play a game but I don't want to drop $500 on the consoles first? In that situation, can it not replace it? The fact that I have to explain to you that the power of Stadia is actually comparable to the Xbox One X kind of shows that you don't have a lot of experience with Stadia, which is fair. Not everybody has a lot of experience with everything, but you're trying to speak on it like you have some sort of authority, which is becoming apparent that you clearly don't. But you know what? That's fine. Let's run with your logic. Let's go ahead and pretend like Stadia does not run as good as the consoles. Let's pretend like it runs worse. If you want to make that sound like it's useless and it's not worth using, then let me follow that logical thought there. On average, gaming PCs run better than consoles. Does that mean gaming PCs make consoles useless? No, they don't. The only thing that matters is for the cost you're paying for it, does it run good enough? Does it have the games that you want to play on it? Doesn't matter if it runs at the very best. If running things the very best was the only thing that mattered, then there would be no point on gaming on anything that's not a $7,000 plus PC.
Then Tharia, the fact both next-gen console can do 120 FPS and the XSX can do 4K 120 FPS. Stadia at this point can't do anything because they have 50 games. They are overcharging to stream games, plus you have to buy the games. You need super fast internet to get the service to work right.
Alright, we're gonna have to break this down one at a time. Start over.
Then Tharia, the fact both next-gen console can do 120 FPS and the XSX can do 4K 120 FPS.
Now come on, you know that's marketing jargon. Just because it is theoretically capable of doing that doesn't mean the games that will be on it will be able to run at those resolutions and frame rates. Maybe a super simplified game that's really optimized might hit that within the first year of release, but odds are before it truly gets 4K 120 FPS, it's probably gonna be way later down the road when developers know how to optimize for it better, or when the next version of the PlayStation or Xbox drops, you know, the upgraded version. Let me give you a better example of what I'm talking about. I have a 2080 graphics card and a 1440p monitor, right? My monitor goes up to 165 FPS. And yes, I can play some games at 165 FPS, but usually to do so, I have to lower my graphics. On the flip side, when I play a modern game at full graphical settings, it's rare that I can push past 90 FPS. So it's not a lie when they say it can do 4K. There's not a lie when it says it can do 120 FPS. But the way the games are made, depending on the games, you're probably not gonna hit those full targets. And I hate to throw this little jab in, but I really can't help myself. If you were really knowledgeable about the subject matter, you would know that. You would know they always overpromise and always underdeliver. That's normal. They're supposed to hype it up. They're supposed to tell you best case scenario, even though they know on average that will not be the reality for most people in most games. Ah, fuck! Why the fuck would I do that?
Stadia at this point can't do anything because they have 50 games.
Actually, Stadia has more than 50 games. But you know what? I'm not going to beat you up over this because I get where you're coming from. You're trying to say that Stadia doesn't have a lot of games compared to its competition. Now, to be fair, Stadia hasn't been out a full year and it doesn't have a previous console to draw from. Every game made for Stadia was made from scratch. It's not an upgraded version or a remaster of a game that was on a previous Stadia. Stadia is a brand new system and it doesn't have a back catalog of games to draw from. So the amount of games that Stadia has on it, which I believe is above 80 right now, I think they're doing pretty good. If you like Stadia and there's a game on Stadia you want to play, then you could play it on Stadia. If it's not on Stadia, you can play it somewhere else. I don't understand why this is such a hard concept. I mean, I have a PlayStation and a PC. There's some games that come out on PlayStation that don't make it to PC, so therefore I play them on my PlayStation. Everything else I play it on my PC. It's very strange to me that people act like you can only have one system. Well, actually, the concept isn't really that strange because once again, I understand not wanting to buy a PlayStation and an Xbox when most of the games you're gonna wanna play will be multi-plat, meaning it's gonna be on both. Why spend 500 bucks on two different systems to have a huge overlap on games? So I do understand in that department just having a PlayStation or just having an Xbox. But see, the whole saving money by not overlapping consoles doesn't really apply to the cloud, especially with Stadia, because you see, Stadia is free. To play a game on Stadia doesn't require any overhead or any additional investment. So it actually makes a lot of sense to play a game on Stadia and also play a game on your favorite console or PC because there is no wasted money in the overlap. It makes way more sense than having a PlayStation and an Xbox. And I'm not saying having a PlayStation and Xbox doesn't make sense. I'm just pointing out on some level, because the consoles overlap, you are wasting money in a sense, at least in comparison to Stadia, which costs nothing.
They are overcharging to stream games, plus you have to buy the games.
I've heard this argument before, but I never really understood it, so I need you to explain this one. If I buy a game on Steam for 60 bucks and I enjoy my experience with it, how's that different than if I buy a game on Stadia for 60 bucks and I enjoy my experience with it? Let's just assume it's the same game. Same gameplay, same features, same levels. How is it overcharging to play it on Stadia as opposed to playing it on Steam? You do know that Stadia is free, right? Once you buy a game on Stadia, you can stream it forever and you don't have to pay a monthly fee. Stadia Pro is a separate optional cost. So how is it overcharging? If anything, Stadia is undercharging because unlike Steam that just has you download the game, then you run it on your own hardware, they are providing you a service by streaming it to you. They are providing you a service by letting you play it on any device, anywhere you go. They are providing you a service. Stadia, Google, is doing more work to allow you to play the game than Steam is.
Oh shit.
Oh, nice! Oh! Let me back up a little bit because I kind of lied when I said I don't understand the argument. In fact, I do understand the argument. People believe that because it's being streamed to you, it's automatically of lesser value than if you have it physically in your hand or if you digitally download it. They believe that just by it being a stream means it's lesser than having it locally. For example, the compression. A streamed game is not going to look as good as a game played locally. Okay, but I don't look at it as being worse. I look at it as a trade-off. A streamed game I can play without having to buy the hardware. I can play anywhere I want. I don't really have to recount the advantages to a stream. You know, in some ways, a stream is worse. In some ways, is better. And if I buy it on Stadia, that means I'm okay with that difference. That means I value what I get from the stream more than I value from what I get from downloading it locally. It's not worse and it's not overcharging. As long as I can play my game whenever I want without having to pay a monthly fee, I think it's a damn good value.
You need super fast internet to get the service to work right.
Again, you're showing your lack of knowledge in this area. They did a study not too long ago that showed that 80 to 90% of people currently meet the internet requirements of Stadia. And as you know, and as you have experienced, the internet over time has been consistently improving. So that means it will keep improving, and people that currently can't use Stadia or have issues with Stadia, those issues will fade away over time. You don't need super fast internet for Stadia. For most of us, the basic internet that we have right now is good enough. There might be some hiccups for some people. Maybe some people aren't close to a data center, but again, these things are improving.
Luna is in a better place unlike Google.
All right, do tell.
Luna has 100 games and has people that know what they are doing.
Luna is doing like xCloud. It's trying to be the Netflix of games, so it has a rotating library of games. There's no guarantee that you're going to have access to those games forever. However, on Stadia, once you claim or buy a game, you have it forever. People often make the mistake. They confuse what Stadia is trying to be. Stadia is not trying to be Netflix. It's trying to be Steam in the cloud. Because on Stadia, you can simply just buy a game and play it forever. There is no need for a monthly fee. On Luna, you will not be able to play without a monthly fee. Don't be fooled simply by saying it's going to have 100 games on it. The value of Luna is not going to be the amount of games that it has. It's going to be the amount of games that it has that you actually want to play. Similar to cable TV.
He's gonna win. Heck shit.
No!
I was rooting on Larry.
Don't you remember when everybody said, oh my god, there's 500 channels and nothing to watch? As you can see, the value of Luna will change based off person to person, depending on if it has the games they want. Which, once again, that doesn't necessarily sound bad, but it's a very different business model than Stadia. You see, because Luna is a Netflix style of games, odds are it's only going to have games on it after the games had their initial sale, at least when it comes to the AAA games. For example, the day Cyberpunk releases, odds are it will not be on Luna. Odds are CD Projekt Red will be trying to sell the game at full price. And over time, maybe a year or two later, it might end up appearing on Luna. See, this shows the strength of Stadia trying to be like Steam. Stadia is putting itself in a position to where when hot AAA games like Cyberpunk drop, they will be on Stadia. Now, I know in Cyberpunk's case, it won't necessarily be on release, but it will be shortly after release, and it will damn sure be there before it gets on Luna. Look, what I'm getting at is that Stadia and Luna's business models are completely different, but you're trying to compare them like they're the same. Keep in mind, we've only been talking about their game selection and their business models. We're not even talking about the stream quality. And keep in mind, Google/YouTube/Stadia, they specialize in video streaming. They've been doing it for years and perfecting it for years. Odds are the stream quality from Stadia will be better than that from Luna, regardless of how many games they have.
But has the same problem. It's a service made by a non-gaming company.
You can already see on its surface this is a boneheaded argument. So you're praising Microsoft and saying they're doing things the right way. You know, Microsoft was not always a gaming company. Sony was not always a gaming company. Nintendo was not always a gaming company. So if you can believe that these non-gaming companies can come in and shake things up and become the leaders in the gaming industry, why don't you think Google can do it? Now, I openly admit, I don't think it's gonna happen overnight. That's a damn long shot, and as you can currently see, Stadia hasn't really gotten the best reception. But you know what? Neither did Microsoft when they first entered the gaming market. It took Microsoft 7 years before they made a decent profit from the Xbox. Took them 7 years before the gaming industry took them seriously. Took them 7 years before they actually started being the preferred gaming console. Stadia hasn't even been out a year, and people are already saying it's doom and gloom. Think about that for a second.
At YaBoyTwiz, game streaming will never replace gaming on hardware.
It might not replace it for everybody, but I can see a time in the future where for most people, game streaming will replace local hardware, the same way that Netflix replaced DVDs. Sure, there's still a few people that use DVDs and Blu-ray, but most people rather just stream on services like Netflix. It might not completely eliminate it, but it will dominate, and I do see that coming. Alright, so everything I said so far in this video, I typed to him in a reply in the comments. So here's his reply to my replies.
He went invulnerable.
Netflix didn't replace watching movies that you download or on Blu-ray because you will always get a better quality experience using hardware no matter the year or how good the infrastructure is.
Again, we got to get our definitions down. By replace, I don't mean that Netflix eliminated DVDs. I don't mean it eliminated Blu-rays, but it did replace it as the dominant way to watch movies. Or maybe not Netflix, but video streaming in general is a preferred way to watch TV and movies over DVDs and Blu-ray. In that case, it did replace it.
Game streaming is like Netflix. It's convenient for people, but that doesn't equal quality.
Well, that depends on what you mean by quality. You mean the quality of convenience? Did you already forget about my comment on the PC versus consoles and how just because the PCs have higher quality, it doesn't make the consoles useless or obsolete? You know what? It doesn't matter. Let me try this. Look at music. Look at movies. Both used to start on hardware. They all used to be played locally. Even counting the reduction in quality, both music and movies have went to the cloud. It should be easy to see that video games are following the same trajectory. Video games used to be played only locally. Then the option came up to start downloading them. In fact, the PlayStation 5 is coming out with a diskless system, a download-only system. And what is the next step? If we follow the same path as music, it looks like streaming's next. What do you know? Streaming's actually here. We have Stadia, we have xCloud, we have GeForce Now, we have Shadow PC, and now we have Luna. Yes, the cloud streaming platforms are still in their infancy. They are still early, but they will improve. And if it shakes out just like it did with music and movies, they will eventually dominate.
Sony started as a TV, radio, movie company. Then started a partnership with Nintendo, who brought gaming back from the dead. Next, Nintendo backtracked on Sony and caused the creation of the PlayStation. Microsoft was a PC company that also started DirectX, which has been used for years by devs for games. Gabe Newell stayed at Microsoft and left, which started Steam. Then a Microsoft employees lied to Bill Gates and said Sony would take over the living room, so Bill Gates told them to make it, and they made the Direct Xbox and they shortened it to Xbox.
I assume this is in response to me saying that Sony, Nintendo, and Microsoft were not always gaming companies. He's deciding to take it upon himself to give me a lecture on gaming history. I really don't see how this is relevant to the conversation. Let's move on.
But it's a different time now than it was in the 80s, 90s, because now Google and Amazon are saying hardware can be replaced with streaming, and it can't.
Depending on who you are and where you live, it actually can. For those of us who meet the requirements, the technology is actually there. We're just waiting on the games. Fuck you, fuck you, fuck you.
Stadia Pro is $10 a month if you want 4K 60 FPS, plus you have to buy the games, and there is only 50, but it does have a free version that is around the same quality as xCloud.
Again, showing your lack of knowledge. Actually, Stadia blows xCloud out of the water, dude. Even the free tier. What are you talking about? Stadia free tier is 1080 60. xCloud paid tier, because there's only a paid tier, is $15 a month, and it's 720 30. At least it feels like 30 FPS with increased input delay. What are you talking about, dude? Once again, I'm not really trying to knock xCloud, but on what planet are those two even remotely the same?
xCloud is $15. It uses X1S servers, but next year it will have XSX servers which will stream 4K 60 FPS, and it comes with over 100 games, plus you can stream any game you have downloaded on your Xbox for free.
Alright, let's chop this up. First off, I know they did say next year the Xbox Series X would be in the cloud, but I'm gonna be honest with you, I think that's what they want to try to do. I don't think they're gonna reach that goal. They don't even have xCloud fully rolled out all over the world. So you're gonna tell me by the time they finally get the current xCloud available to everybody, they're gonna rip everything up and put in the Series X? I just find it really hard to believe they're gonna be able to do all that in a year. I'm not saying that it's impossible, but I think they're biting off more than they can chew by promising that. I do believe they'll do it eventually, but I'm not convinced it will be finished by next year. Okay, next, when they eventually get the Xbox Series X in the cloud, I'm not convinced it's actually going to be able to do 4K 120 FPS in the cloud. It might, but I'm not convinced it's going to be able to. They might end up capping it at 4K 60. They might end up capping it at 1080, 120. Unlike Google, Microsoft doesn't specialize in video streaming. Microsoft doesn't have as many servers all over the world like Google. It's going to be harder for them to do high bandwidth streaming to a lot of people compared to Google Stadia. Now, once again, this is not saying they won't be able to do it, but I wouldn't be too surprised if they don't end up putting a cap on it or limiting it in some way, or even increasing the cost. I mean, for example, the Xbox One S can technically do 1080 60, and these are the current consoles they're using to stream right now. So why is the stream capped at 720 30? You kind of see what I'm saying? Just because the machine they're using in the cloud can put out that power doesn't mean their servers can put out that much bandwidth. I'm not trapped in here with you. You're trapped in here with me. Oh, you fucker! Fucker! And I got one more thing to add to that. Like you pointed out, you said that Microsoft wasn't treating the cloud as its own standalone thing. You said Microsoft was treating it as a companion to hardware or something you do on the side of hardware. So if they're not fully focused on making the cloud as good as possible, doesn't it make even more sense that they would cap it and not really try to get the full power out of it and not waste resources on that? Because their goal for the cloud is just for something you do on the side. You know, something you do so you can test the game out before you download it. It's not meant to replace hardware. It's meant to be a companion to hardware. This is more or less what you said. So why would they waste resources to try to make their cloud infrastructure as good as possible instead of just making it good enough? Something to think about. So when you look at their competition, Stadia and Luna, that are cloud only, they have no hardware to push. It's more likely that they're going to try to make their cloud infrastructure as good as possible because that's all they got. So I wouldn't be too surprised if Luna and Stadia end up being a better streaming experience than xCloud. Not throwing shade at xCloud. I'm not saying xCloud isn't going to be decent. I'm not saying it's not going to be good enough. But when you look at the evidence that we laid forward, if one of the streaming services ends up not being as good as the rest, it's probably going to be xCloud.
Luna is $6 for now, price will 100% go up, and has 100 games on day one, so it's already better than Stadia.
Is it going to have Cyberpunk? Probably not, right? Because Cyberpunk's going to be a hot new AAA game. The problem with Luna being a Netflix of games means it's mostly going to have older games. It's not going to have that many brand new AAA games the day that they come out, aside from the games they develop themselves. So yeah, you do have access to a larger library of games, but what if you want to play that new hot title that drops today? It's not going to be on Luna. It might be on Stadia. See the difference? One more time, I need to make sure this sinks in. You keep doing a false comparison between Stadia and Luna. They do not have the same business model. They are not competing in the same way. Stadia is trying to be a storefront. Luna is trying to be a Netflix of games. So of course, Stadia is going to be a worse Netflix of games than Luna. But you know what? Luna is going to be a worse storefront than Stadia. They're competing in two different ways. Luna's business model is much closer to xCloud, a Netflix of games, a rotating library of games. Stadia is like Steam. You buy a game and have access to it forever. They are different things. Please look at them differently. Hey, hi, Chaos. Chaos, come say hi. You're not doing that to me again, Chaos. Yeah!
Stadia will always be the reason people don't like cloud gaming because it sucks and it seems Google is letting die slowly.
What sucks about Stadia again? Please let me know in your infinite wisdom. Now look, man, just because Microsoft is making big power moves, buying a whole bunch of companies, and really just doing good across the board, Microsoft's success does not necessarily equal Stadia's failure. That's like saying Microsoft's success equals Nintendo's failure or equals Steam's failure. Last I checked, Steam is still doing just fine regardless of what Microsoft is doing. Now, I will side with you on one point. I do personally feel that now it's time for Google to step up and at least start showing people what they're doing. Because see, one of the things about Google, the reason people think it's dying, or the reason you think it's dying, because Google is updating Stadia. Google is adding games and features to the platform. They're just not making a big deal out of it. They're just doing silent stealth updates. I think Google needs to learn from Microsoft and actually start being more flashy and let their people know something good is coming. That is one change I would like to see from Google. But once again, it's not evidence that Google's dying. It's just evidence that Google has very bad PR and marketing.
Xbox is the only company that figured out how cloud should be. A part of hardware, not a replacement, because hardware will always run games better.
I don't know if it's so much that Microsoft figured it out. It's more like Microsoft was in a unique position to do that. You see, Microsoft's infrastructure is not as good as Stadia's. If Microsoft tried to go toe-to-toe with Stadia purely in the cloud, they would lose. They would lose. However, Microsoft combining their cloud infrastructure with their hardware and bundling it into one package, that's something that their competition just cannot do, and they're hitting the ground running with it. So admittedly, the way Microsoft is doing it is an easier transition into the cloud. But what about people that don't need to transition to the cloud? What about people that are ready just to jump right in the cloud? See, we don't need Microsoft's transition. We don't need the hardware and the cloud bundled together. We're ready just for the cloud. I do want to touch on a point though, where you say hardware will always run it better. You mean local hardware, as in it's running in your house, because technically when it's in the cloud, it's still running on hardware. But with that said, the hardware that you have in your house has to be affordable. The parts inside of it have to be affordable. So therefore, there's a limit to how strong any hardware will be in your house. When the gaming companies eventually stop worrying about limiting stuff to what somebody can buy and have in their homes, and they focus on just having the most powerful supercomputers they have in the cloud, the hardware we'll be connected to in the cloud will be easily 10 to 20 times more powerful than anything we'll have in our home. And when that happens, you'll truly see the power of the cloud. You'll be connected to gaming machines that are more powerful than anything you've ever gamed on, potentially, right? And when you have access to these machines, what you can run locally will pale in comparison. That is the future of the cloud.
Hi, Sherman. Herman Hicks is better, please. You get that feeling?
Good, but
Watch out!
I am Bomber 1!
If you look at games on Stadia which has 10 T-flops, it looks worse than on a 6 T-flop X1X, and I bet when xCloud gets the XSX serves, xCloud will look way better than Stadia.
I have actually looked at the difference because, you know, I actually play games on Stadia, and if you listen to any credible reviewer, they will tell you Stadia is often very comparable to the Xbox One X. Sometimes it's a little bit worse, admittedly. However, sometimes it's a little bit better. Regardless of how many teraflops it has, that doesn't really mean anything. The only thing that matters is how well the games run, and like I said, it runs very comparable. And guess what? It's $500 cheaper. Now, when you compare it to the Xbox Series X, you know, the Xbox console that isn't out yet, the next Xbox coming, you do know that Stadia plans to upgrade as well. But here's the kicker. When Stadia upgrades to Generation 2, it's not going to cost us anything. However, when you upgrade from the Xbox One X to the Xbox Series X, what do you know? You got to shell out another $500. Then guess what happens after that? 4 or 5 years down the road, when they come out with the Xbox Series X Plus, you're gonna have to shell out another $500. Well, guess what? When Stadia Generation 3 drops, again, it's not gonna cost us anything. Are you starting to see the value of the cloud yet?
Hardware will always win. Good luck on Google's Ouya 2.
Well, hardware does not appear to be winning when it comes to the cost of upgrading the hardware. Because with the cloud infrastructure, we don't pay for the cost of the generation upgrades. They come to us for free. At least with Stadia, they will. With that said, I'm your boy Twiz. Don't forget to like, comment, follow, and subscribe. And as always, thank you so much for supporting my channel. Laters, y'all.
We'll see. Oh, yeah, get the fuck. Is that you, Lottie?